On February 17, 1974, a brutal attack took place in a darkened parking lot in Fort Worth, Texas. 17-year-old girl Carla Walker was torn away from her boyfriend by an armed assailant. For 3 agonizing days, a massive search effort gripped the local community until her body was discovered in a concrete culvert near Benbrook Lake. Police recovered a gun magazine clip dropped by the attacker, collected biological evidence from the victim's clothing, and interviewed dozens of potential suspects. Yet despite these immediate clues, the trails went cold, the leads dried up, and the investigation ground to a complete halt. Decades passed, and the case transformed into a legendary mystery within the annals of Texas law enforcement. A technology that did not exist at the time of the crime would eventually change everything. Before we explore how this historic mystery was solved, I invite you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below letting us know where you are watching from. Your support allows us to continue producing in-depth, respectful documentaries that honor victims and highlight the pursuit of justice. To understand the profound impact of this tragedy, we must look at who Carla Walker was before that winter night. Carla was a 17-year-old junior at Western Hills High School, remembered by friends and family as a warm, sweet-natured, and deeply compassionate young girl. Her family life was anchored by her father, Leighton Walker, a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel who instilled a sense of discipline and deep protection in their household, and her loving mother, Doris. Carla shared a close, protective bond with her brother, Jim, and her sister, Cindy. She was a girl with big dreams, stepping into the peak of her youth and looking forward to her senior year and the future that lay beyond. Her relationship with her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, a high school football player, was marked by the gentle innocence of teenage romance in the 1970s. On the evening of February 16, 1974, the two attended the Western Hills High School annual Valentine's Day dance. They danced, celebrated with classmates, and enjoyed an evening that should have been a cherished high school memory. After the dance concluded, the young teenagers spent time hanging out with friends before finally driving to the Brunswick Lanes just after midnight on February 17. The parking lot was mostly empty and shrouded in darkness. They stopped briefly so Carla could use the restroom and they could chat for a short while before Rodney had to drop her off at home. Suddenly, the passenger side door of Rodney's car was violently yanked open. A stranger stepped out from the darkness, wielding a pistol, and immediately began beating Rodney across the face and head with the heavy weapon. Rodney was flooded with blood and drifted in and out of consciousness. As Rodney slumped against the seat, completely incapacitated, the assailant grabbed Carla and began dragging her out of the vehicle. Carla fought back desperately, trying to break free from the attacker's grip. Knowing her boyfriend was severely injured and unable to help, she screamed her final, heartbreaking words, "Rodney, go get my dad." Then she was pulled into the dark night, leaving behind an empty parking lot and a severely injured boy. Rodney managed to regain enough consciousness to drive the short distance to the Walker family home. He pounded frantically on the front door, covered in blood and deeply traumatized. When Leighton Walker answered, Rodney screamed through his injuries that someone had taken Carla and was going to hurt her. Leighton immediately grabbed his own pistol and rushed to the bowling alley, while Carla's mother contacted the police. When authorities arrived at the Brunswick Lanes parking lot, they discovered Carla's purse left behind on the oil-stained ground. Beside it lay a critical, tangible piece of evidence, a gun magazine clip that had accidentally detached from the assailant's weapon during the violent struggle. For 3 long days, the city of Fort Worth was on high alert. Search parties combed through empty fields, police cruisers lined the streets, and helicopters circled overhead. The agonizing suspense ended on February 20, 1974, when a search team located Carla's body dumped inside a concrete culvert near Benbrook Lake. The medical examiner confirmed she had been kept alive for up to 2 days, subjected to severe physical and indecent assault, and ultimately strangled to death. The community was paralyzed with fear, realizing a violent predator was walking among them. The Fort Worth Police Department launched a massive investigation, working chronologically through every available lead. Their primary physical clue was the recovered magazine clip, which belonged to a Ruger 0.22 caliber pistol. Investigators pulled federal firearms records to track down every individual in Tarrant County, who had recently purchased that specific type of ammunition or magazine. This meticulously compiled list eventually led them to a 32-year-old married father named Glenn Samuel McCurley. When detectives interviewed McCurley in 1974, he appeared perfectly calm, ordinary, and cooperative. He admitted to owning a Ruger .22 caliber pistol, but claimed that it had recently been stolen out of his truck. He lacked a solid, verifiable alibi for the night of the murder, but he had no prior criminal record. In 1974, forensic science was in its infancy. DNA profiling did not exist, and fingerprinting required clear, intact ridges left on smooth surfaces. Without a confession, an eyewitness who could see clearly in the dark parking lot, or a direct forensic link, investigators lacked the legal grounds to make an arrest. McCurley was crossed off the suspect list. The case files were eventually boxed up and moved into the basement archives. For decades, nothing happened. The evidence remained completely silent. Carla's parents passed away without ever learning who took their daughter's life. Her brother, Jim, and sister, Cindy, grew into adulthood carrying the heavy, permanent burden of unsolved grief, wondering if they passed their sister's killer on the street every single day. Then, the case appeared finished. The trails were cold and the original investigators retired. But the Fort Worth Police Department's cold case unit, led decades later by detectives Lee Wagner and Jay Bennett, refused to let Carla be forgotten. In 2019, they decided to pull the old evidence boxes from storage. Inside, they found the clothing Carla had been wearing when she was discovered. The biological evidence left by the killer was incredibly tiny, severely degraded by 45 years of time, and highly fragile. Traditional DNA testing methods, which require relatively fresh and abundant samples, had failed in previous years, returning only incomplete, unusable data. Recognizing this was their absolute last chance at justice, the detectives partnered with Othram Inc., a highly specialized private laboratory in Houston, Texas, that focused entirely on extracting and analyzing severely degraded forensic samples. The scientists at Othram utilized a revolutionary forensic process known as forensic genetic genealogy. To understand this complex topic, it helps to look at how it differs from traditional law enforcement DNA testing. Traditional DNA profiling examines a specific set of 20 genetic markers to find an exact match in a criminal database. If the killer's DNA is not already in the system, the search returns nothing. Genetic genealogy, however, analyzes hundreds of thousands of tiny genetic variations called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. This vast amount of data allows scientists to construct a highly detailed, comprehensive genetic profile. Once this profile was generated from the 45-year-old stain on Carla's clothing, it was uploaded to public genealogical databases like GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, where millions of ordinary citizens upload their data to build family trees. The software scans these databases to find distant relatives, third, fourth, or fifth cousins who share segments of DNA with the unknown suspect. Forensic genealogists then manually construct massive, intricate family trees, tracing the lineages backward to common ancestors and then forward to living descendants. Within months, the genetic web began to narrow. The DNA extracted from the crime scene pointed directly to one specific branch of a family tree in Texas, the McCurley family. But investigators didn't know which member of the family was responsible. They were missing one critical piece to bridge the gap between genetic probability and absolute legal proof. Detectives focused their sights on the living descendants. Still residing in Fort Worth, just miles from the original crime scene, was Glenn Samuel McCurley, now a frail, 78-year-old grandfather. In the summer of 2020, detectives knocked on McCurley's door. He invited them inside his home. To anyone looking in, he was the picture of a peaceful, elderly family man. When questioned about the 1974 murder, he repeated the exact same story he had told detectives nearly half a century earlier. His gun had been stolen, and he knew absolutely nothing about the young girl. He appeared confident that 46 years was enough time to wash away a crime. This time, the evidence answered. The detectives asked McCurley for a voluntary DNA swab from the inside of his cheek. He consented. Detectives obtained Glenn McCurley's DNA by retrieving a discarded McDonald's straw from his trash bin and later confirming it with a voluntary mouth swab. The laboratory compared his fresh profile directly against the microscopic profile extracted from Carla's clothing. It was a perfect, undeniable match. The mathematical probability of the DNA belonging to anyone else was 1 in billions. On September 21, 2020, handcuffs were placed on Glenn Samuel McCurley, and he was officially charged with capital murder. The case officially went to trial in August 2021 in Tarrant County, Texas. The courtroom was filled with a tangible tension, packed with Carla's surviving family members and an aging Rodney McCoy. The defense team attempted to challenge the evidence, arguing that the 46-year-old biological sample was contaminated, degraded, and completely unreliable due to the passage of decades. They argued that any statements McCurley made during his modern interrogations were the confused ramblings of an elderly man who felt pressured by authorities. On the second day of the trial, the prosecution played the videotape of McCurley's police interrogation for the jury. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as the elderly man sat in a small room, confronted by detectives with the mathematical certainty of the DNA match.
What was the reason you selected the spot that you did, the place her body?
It was against the building.
Wasn't against the building.
Just a couple minutes ago, you said you did what you did, and then you dropped her off.
I walked her over to these bushes and just had her stay right there, and then I took off.
Well, we know that's not how it ended up.
The decades of denials slowly fractured. On the tape, McCurley broke down, sobbed, and admitted to yanking Carla out of the car, indecently assaulting her and strangling her to death. Faced with the public broadcast of his own taped confession and the unassailable mountain of forensic science, McCurley realized there was no path to an acquittal. On August 24, 2021, he stunned the courtroom by halting his own trial and changing his plea from not guilty to guilty. The judge immediately accepted the plea and sentenced Glenn Samuel McCurley to life in prison. He was walked out of the courtroom in a jumpsuit, destined to spend the remainder of his days behind bars. He would ultimately pass away in prison 2 years later, in 2023. Carla Walker's story reminds us that justice does not have an expiration date. While a predator managed to live an ordinary life for 46 years, the truth eventually caught up to him. Carla's name no longer stands merely as a symbol of a tragic cold case. It stands as a permanent beacon of hope for the forgotten, ensuring that no matter how many decades pass, the light of truth will eventually break through the darkest night.